used to fight terrorism. Hear why some blast the U.S. government for using them. Unexploded cluster bombs in Sri Lanka? Government officials say not so. And Ashton Kutcher's caricature in a commercial gets a cold response. Is it racist? Hello, I'm Esther Vida. Welcome to SAW News, bringing you news, views, and entertainment from the South Asian community in the United States. Michael Kugelman is a program associate at the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars in Washington, D.C. He specializes in South Asian studies. He's also a frequent contributor to World Politics Review, Times of India, and the Huffington Post, to name a few. We recently spoke via Skype about the controversial use of drones by the United States and Pakistan, India-Pakistan relations, and much more.
Michael, thanks so much for taking time to be with us today.
My pleasure.
I want to start out by talking about a recent article that you wrote in the Huffington Post. You wrote about John Brennan, the counterterrorism chief's visit to your place of work, Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars, where he talks about the use of drones, and he calls them, quote, ethical and just. He says there's nothing casual about this, and he says that civilian casualties are exceedingly rare in the use of drones. You write, quote, human activists reject, rightly so, such sanguine statements, and the case of Pakistan arguably buttressed their argument the most. Why?
Well, I think it's very simple. John Brennan and many others in the Obama administration have said that there have been very few civilian casualties with these drones in Pakistan, but I really think that that's just not true. It's true that drones as a method of warfare are much less deadly to civilians than more traditional tools are, but at the same time, there's no denying that many civilians, now in terms of how many, it's hard to say, I'm not going to try to say how many, but there have been a fair number of civilians that have been killed, including, as I say in the article, some very tragic cases of Pakistani civilians trying to rescue or save people who have been wounded or killed by drones. They've been killed. And then you've had cases of civilians attending funerals of those who have been killed by drones. Those attending funerals have been killed. This is according to the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. And then also, it's not just people getting killed, but people getting maimed and injured. And you have to keep in mind that we're focusing on the tribal areas of Pakistan here. This is a part of the world that's just tremendously impoverished. There's been war and violence for many years. There's a lot of displacement. There have been natural disasters. So you've got people who have been displaced, who are very poor, who are hungry. And, if these people lose their house, then that just adds to the terrible toll that life has taken on them lately. So it really is very tragic for these
and
people.
And that's sort of the other thing that perhaps people don't think about, that already a lot of the people in Pakistan are impoverished. They've been dislocated, and now they're located to a new place. Now they've been affected by drones, so they have to move again. The psychological toll in of itself must be incredible.
Yeah, I mean, and especially for the children. I mean, let's face it, these are kids that have really, in many cases, lived a life on the move, always worried about violence. Perhaps they've lost loved ones, many of them have. And, it's just the fear. It's not just a case of a drone hitting someone, but just fearing that that could happen. As I said in that article, they're children. They hear the sound of the drones, and apparently it makes a very characteristic sound, a buzzing sound. In fact, Pakistanis have used a word to describe it that approximately translates to wasp, because it sounds like a buzzing wasp. And you've had, these drones tend to circle around the same area for a long time, and so you could have these people on the ground afraid that they're going to get something dropped on them real soon. And even if it doesn't actually happen, the psychological impact, in my view, is just really intense.
But still, the Obama administration, John Brennan, the chief counterterrorism expert, said that these are just and they have worked. If you say that they are hurting people and have not worked, then what can they use to fight terrorism?
Well, I mean, that's the very point. You make it right there. There really is no other option. I mean, in an ideal world, the Pakistani and the American militaries would be working together on counter-terror activities. Of course, the bilateral relationship simply does not allow for that. And we need to acknowledge that these drones have killed several high-level militants that pose as much of a danger to Pakistan as they do to the United States. I'm thinking of the former head of the Pakistani Taliban. He was killed by a drone. He was sitting out on his roof getting a foot massage, apparently, and he was attacked, and his life ended that way. Ilyas Kashmiri was an Al-Qaeda linked terrorist, and there have been many other foot soldiers who have been killed by these drone strikes, foot soldiers of Al-Qaeda and other militants. And one could argue that that's effective in terms of whether it's moral, in the sense that though you've killed those folks, you've also killed many civilians who have no business being killed at all.
Pakistanis are now threatening to keep a key NATO pathway closed if the drone attacks don't stop.
And I think this is probably going to continue. I really don't think the United States is going to stop drones. I mean, there's been some talk about maybe negotiating around the edges, doing things like having drones fly under the Pakistani flag. But still, I don't really know if that's going to happen. The U.S. simply does not have any other counter-terrorist tools at its disposal that it can use, and for that reason, it's a very strategic tool for the United States that it really is not going to abandon.
So you've got the drones issue. You also have a few in the military saying that they should be getting some of the credit for capturing Osama bin Laden. There's an increasing friction between the Pakistani and the United States military. Where do you see the future of Washington and Islamabad relationship going?
Well, I really don't think it's ever going to improve that much. I mean, given that the two capitals share very few interests, other than perhaps stability in Afghanistan, though how that stability is attained, each capital has a different idea of that, I think. There are just too many divergent interests, and as we've seen in the last few days, the last few weeks, the Pakistani parliament has come out with all these new guidelines that it would like to define the relationship from here on out. One of those guidelines was no more drones, and there was just a drone that was launched in North Waziristan a few days ago. So we see that these guidelines aren't going to have an effect, and really, I think that's just going to the problems and the tension. So I'm not too optimistic right now.
Michael, take us to the basic issue of Pakistan. Besides, from the standpoint of a terrorism strategic area important to the United States, why else should the people in the United States, our audience, care what is going on in Pakistan?
Well, I think it's impossible to deny that Pakistan in of itself is a very important, a very strategic country by virtue of where it's located, by virtue of the allies it has, which include Saudi Arabia and China, and by virtue of the fact that it's a country with a rapidly growing population, about almost 200 million people now, and that's going to be much higher 20 years down the road. And it is a country with a lot of instability, and it's a nuclear state, and that attracts attention. Instead, I think what we don't hear about as much in this country, in the U.S., is really all of the good things that Pakistan has to offer. Young people are really quite impressive. I engage many of them all the time through my own work. It's a country that has for example, an IT sector, innovation. It's just really impressive in the country. And you don't hear about that too much, and it's there. There are assets there that I wish we could hear more about.
Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State, is going to be in India next week. What do you expect to come out of those talks?
Well, the relationship between the U.S. and India has not. We had been told that it was improving, and during the Bush administration, there was a strategic relationship formed, and we were led to believe that things were going pretty well. But then there was a period of drift that's lasted into the present, where there have been some concerns on both sides about various issues, and I think that Hillary Clinton's going to try to bring things together and try to improve things, smooth some feathers that have been ruffled, and I think it's symbolic more than anything else. But I think it's an important visit just to reassure India that the United States still considers it a strong ally. Though I would not expect any major conclusions to come out of it, any major initiatives or anything like that.
Okay, Michael, I hope to have you on again very soon. Thank you so much for your expertise.
My pleasure.
According to an email acquired by the Associated Press, a UN mine removal expert says there are unexploded cluster munitions in northern Sri Lanka, possibly responsible for the death of a boy. The news comes on the heels of a UN Human Rights Council resolution urging the Sri Lankan government to do more in addressing alleged human rights violations during the nation's 26-year civil war with the Tamil Tigers. Cluster munitions are packed with small bomblets that scatter indiscriminately and often harm civilians. Allegedly, the bombs were found at the site where a boy was killed and his sister injured while trying to pry apart an explosive device. I spoke to Dr. Palitha Kahona, the Sri Lankan ambassador to the United Nations, about these allegations.
So, Dr. Kahona, please comment on the reports that a UN expert found some unexploded cluster bombs in the northern area of Sri Lanka.
First and foremost, I don't think this was a UN expert. I don't think he claimed to be an expert. He made these claims. One thing that is absolutely certain is that Sri Lanka never acquired cluster bombs, never had cluster bombs, never deployed cluster bombs. This has been made absolutely clear by our authorities since 2009, when this claim was first made, or allegation was first made, and it's been repeated again in our official sources, through our official sources.
Have booby traps at all been used during the Civil War?
I don't think Sri Lanka actually ever used booby traps. The defense forces ever used booby traps, but they were used extensively by the LTT, and in fact, it is quite possible that this UN official, because he had a propensity for using terminology that was provocative, used the word cluster bombs to describe an improvised explosive device, IED, that had been deployed by the LTT. The LTT used IEDs extensively, and in fact, they were quite good at it. They were masters at this.
Ashton Kutcher's impersonation of a Bollywood character in a Pop Chips commercial is drawing fire from many in the South Asian community. The appearance by Kutcher in a brown face with an Indian accent is being called racist and inappropriate. The character is one of many multicultural single men played by Kutcher. Pop Chips officials say it was meant to be comedic, but the video appears to be drawing some fire.
I'm Raj. I'm a Bollywood producer. I'm looking for the most delicious thing on the planet, like Kardashian hot. I would give that dog a bone.
This is not the first time an actor or public figure has been criticized for this type of behavior. Deepa Iyer, the executive director of South Asian Americans Leading Together, or SALT, says caricatures like these are damaging to the South Asian community.
Deepa, I'm not sure if you're familiar with a recent ad done by Ashton Kutcher where he was imitating an Indian man. He was highly criticized for his imitation. It was for some kind of a chip. And a lot of groups criticized him for emulating an Indian man. What do you think those types of ads and those types of imitations and so forth do to the community? Or should they be frowned upon, or are they just funny?
Well, I think that any time there are caricatures of different communities, that there should be resistance to those, and I think that that's what we saw with the brown face ad that Ashton Kutcher was part of, right? And that ad was full in large part due to a lot of people, both celebrities as well as community members, saying this is not appropriate. And I think that you see that in situations like this ad, but we also see that sort of targeting or mimicking or caricaturing happening in other realms. We have been noticing in the political realm, actually, that there have been comments and remarks and statements made by people who are either elected, who are in elected office, or who are running for office that are, again, targeting our community members. Saying, for example, jobs. We saw last year hearings that Representative Peter King held in Congress about the Muslim community, for example. We have seen years ago when a Hindu priest offered a prayer in Congress that there was a congressman who said, what has happened to our country? Now we've got a Hindu prayer being said in Congress. And we believe that that's actually an important display of showing the multicultural aspect of our country, right? But what we're seeing more and more is that whether it's in the entertainment realm or whether it's in the realm of political discourse, that our community tends to be targeted or depicted in very negative ways. And the impact is that, if it's Ashton Kutcher or if it's Representative Peter King, because they can hold the public space, what the impact is that members of the general public will also begin to have those same sentiments or those same reactions to people from our community, their coworkers or students or peers. And so we believe that it's really important, to push back against anything that is negatively depicting our community members.
The video has since been pulled by the company Pop Chips. Incidentally, tune in next week to hear more of my conversation with SALT Executive Director Deepa Iyer. Hear about a recent report detailing how backlash continues at an alarming rate 11 years after the September 11th terrorist attacks. And finally, Sri Lanka's permanent mission to the United Nations has a new home in New York.
Finally, I understand you have a new home.
We do. We have, after 50 odd years of occupying rented premises, we have moved into our own premises on 2nd Avenue, closer to the United Nations. And we're very happy about this development.
And this is a significant savings to the people of Sri Lanka.
Indeed. As we all know, currently the prices of real estate in New York have come down, and I think we did well. We acquired this property with the assistance of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka. As a result of this, we will be able to save on rental that we have been spending so far in a considerable manner.
That's our show for this week. If you have any ideas for stories or comments, email me at esther@bostonlanka.com. And make sure you tune in next week for another edition of SAW News. See you then.